There's a moment in every legend when the mask slips. For George S. Patton, the general who terrified Hitler's generals, who charged where others retreated, who believed in reincarnation and second chances at military glory, that moment came in a hospital ward in Sicily. What happened next would expose the fragility of the man behind the myth. And Eisenhower had to make an impossible choice: save Patton's career or protect the integrity of the army itself. July 10, 1943, Sicily. 90,000 American troops hit the beaches of Operation Husky, the largest amphibious invasion the world had ever seen. Patton commanded them, and for the first time in his career, he was not leading the main assault. That role belonged to Bernard Montgomery, the British general who had become the media's golden boy after defeating Rommel in North Africa. Montgomery was the celebrated one. Montgomery was the national hero. Patton was support. Patton was backup. Imagine spending your entire military life building a reputation for audacity, for being willing to do what others won't, to risk what others fear to risk. Then imagine being told, stand back, protect someone else's flank, let someone else have the glory. Patton's orders were clear: hold the line, support the British advance to Messina. But within days, Montgomery's forces hit a wall. German resistance hardened. The terrain became impossible. The campaign stalled. And Patton saw an opportunity. He had discovered something in his reconnaissance. The road to Palermo, Sicily's capital, was likely defended. If he could take it, if he could pivot north and then race east to Messina, he could steal the entire victory from Montgomery. Patton went to his superior officer, General Alexander, and made a case for a bold offensive move. And Alexander, weak, indecisive, caught between an American commander and a British one, both demanding everything, he said yes. Patton got his glory. His 45th Infantry Division raced across Sicily. Palermo fell. The newspapers back home started talking about an American general who could move faster, fight harder, be more daring than the celebrated British. For a few days, Patton was no longer the backup. He was the story. But victory, as Patton would soon discover, has a price. August 3, 1943. Nicosia, Sicily. Patton arrives unannounced at the 15th Evacuation Hospital. He's visiting the wounded, doing what he does, talking to the men, boosting morale, being the general that legends are made of. In the ward, he finds a private named Charles Cool, 21 years old, from Detroit. Cool has been a soldier for 4 years. He's fought in North Africa. He's seen combat. But today, Cool is sitting on a cot. He's dehydrated, feverish, trembling. A doctor walks Patton through the diagnosis. The soldier is suffering from what they call battle fatigue. In modern terms, you'd call it combat stress reaction. The body's response to prolonged exposure to extreme trauma and fear. It's a real medical condition. But Patton doesn't see a medical condition. He sees weakness. He sees cowardice masquerading as illness. He sees a soldier failing to live up to the standard, and something breaks inside him. Patton walks up to Cool. He calls him a coward. He tells him he's disgracing the uniform. He tells him there's nothing wrong with him except lack of guts. Then Patton slaps him, hard. His hand cracks across the soldier's face like a gunshot. The ward goes silent. Everyone, the doctors, the nurses, the wounded men, they all freeze. They're watching the most famous general in the army strike a sick soldier in front of witnesses. It's not over. Patton grabs Cool by the collar and drags him to the ward entrance. He shoves him out into the Sicilian sun. Then he turns back to the medical staff. With his finger pointed, with contempt in every syllable, he says, "Don't admit this son of a bitch." I don't want yellow-bellied bastards like him hiding their lousy cowardice around here, stinking up this place of honor. Patton leaves. The ward remains in shock. A soldier who came to the hospital for medical help has just been publicly humiliated by his commanding general. One doctor turns to a colleague and quietly says, "What we just witnessed, it's not just unusual, it's dangerous." 1 week later, August 10th, 1943. Another evacuation hospital, this time near Santo Stefano. Patton is visiting again. He's become fixated on rooting out what he sees as cowardice in the medical system. This is his mission now. This is where he's focused his intensity. Another soldier, Paul Bennett, another case of battle fatigue, dehydrated, feverish, confused, struggling because he'd watched his best friend get blown apart by shrapnel just hours before. Patton reaches him before the doctors can step in, and this time, Patton doesn't just slap him, he threatens him with a pistol. He tells Bennett he should be shot for cowardice. He pulls his weapon and points it at a sick soldier in front of doctors and medical staff. What Patton did in those 2 hospital wards wasn't just insubordinate. It wasn't just unprofessional, it was a crime. Under military law, striking a subordinate is a court-martial offence. Threatening one with a weapon? That's worse. That's grounds for removal from command. That's grounds for disgrace. But here's what Patton didn't know. Word was spreading. The doctors talked to each other. The nurses talked to each other. Medical channels started reporting up the chain of command. And eventually, the report landed on the desk of the one man who had authority over Patton, General Dwight D. Eisenhower. Eisenhower knew what was in that report. He knew about the slapping. He knew about the threats. He knew that if this became public, Congress would demand Patton's execution. The American people would be outraged. "This is a general," they would say, "who strikes dying soldiers." Eisenhower had to make a choice. And this is where the story shifts, from Patton's moment of violence to Eisenhower's moment of impossible calculation. Eisenhower sent a secret letter to Patton. The date, August 17th, 1943. Eisenhower wrote, "I clearly understand that firm and drastic measures are at times necessary to secure the desired objectives. But this does not excuse brutality, abuse of the sick, nor exhibition of uncontrollable temper in front of subordinates." It was a rebuke, it was a warning, but it wasn't a court-martial recommendation. It wasn't a removal from command. Instead, Eisenhower made a calculation. Patton was too valuable, too aggressive, too useful for what was coming next. Eisenhower knew that the war in Europe would require exactly the kind of general that Patton was. Willing to take risks, willing to break rules, willing to do what others wouldn't. And he believed, in his calculation, that Patton's value to the war effort outweighed his crimes. Eisenhower ordered Patton to apologize, to the soldiers, to the doctors, to every man under his command. And Patton did. He gave speeches. He found Cool and Bennett and apologized face to face. He acknowledged his actions were wrong, but the relationship was changed. The myth was cracked. Patton knew from that moment on that his position was conditional, that his general's stars depended on Eisenhower's forbearance, that the man he had served under could, with one word, destroy him. The slapping incidents in Sicily are often treated as a footnote, a moment of controversy that was covered up, suppressed, and moved past. But they reveal something deeper about command, about authority, and about what happens when even legends discover they're not invincible. Patton was a man who had built his entire identity on being unbreakable, on leading through force of will, on expecting perfection and punishing weakness. And in those hospital wards in Sicily, that identity fractured. Because the men he was confronting weren't cowards. They were soldiers whose minds and bodies had reached the absolute limit of what they could endure. Patton couldn't understand that then. Maybe he never did. But Eisenhower understood something Patton didn't. That mercy is sometimes a strategic advantage. That letting someone off wasn't weakness, it was vision. That the best way to control Patton wasn't through court-martial, but through the silent reminder that his power was never absolute. After Sicily, Patton remained a commanding general. He fought in Europe. He achieved legendary victories. But he was never again the invincible old blood and guts. He was, from August 10th, 1943 onward, a general who knew he had been forgiven. And that knowledge, more than any punishment, changed everything about how he commanded. Whether that made him better or merely more careful, history leaves that question unanswered. But it made him undeniably human.